Here is our first question. You need to deploy resource to host a stateless web app in Azure subscription. The solution must meet the following requirement. It should support .NET Framework. It should provide redundancy if an Azure region fails. It should have options to scale up and down the resources. Let's move to next question. In this question, it says Azure App Service has options to scale up and scale out. What does scaling up an app do? Choose the correct option. Let's move to the next question then. You have a Java app running in Azure App Service. Good. How do you validate which version of runtime stack is running for Azure App Service? Okay, choose the correct option. To next question. Your application is deployed on Azure App Service. The app service plan is B1. You're hosted a web app named Demo App on Azure App Service. What would be the URL to access your application? It's time to move to next question. In this question, it says your on-premise data center contains a server that runs Linux and hosts a Java app named App1. Okay, we have a data center and we have a server in the data center which is running on the Linux operating system, and it is hosting a Java application named App1. App1 has the following characteristics. App1 is an interactive app that users access by using HTTPS connection. So HTTPS connection means it is a web app. Okay, the number of connections to App1 changes significantly throughout the day. This means a lot of users keep connecting to the App1 changes on App1 throughout the day. Okay, then App1 runs multiple concurrent instances. Hello everyone and welcome to this video of 591 Lab. I am Manny and I'm thrilled to have you here. In this video, we are going to learn about Azure App Services and review some questions related to Az305 exams. Azure App Service is a fully managed platform as a service offering. It enables you to build and host the web applications. So before we begin our learning, let us introduce ourselves first. We are 591 Lab and we are the top IT training and certification exam brand in China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore. Our mission here is to provide our clients with exceptional exam preparation experience for certification in Cisco, Huawei, Aruba, Juniper, Microsoft, and Azure Cloud. To know about us in detail, please visit 591lab.com. Along with this, we have a humble request to subscribe our channel, like the video, and hit the notification bell. This helps us to create more content like this for you. Without taking more time, let's have a look at the agenda for the session. In this session, we are going to learn about Azure App Services, and after that, we'll talk about what is Azure App Service Plan, and then we are going to see it by hosting one web application on Azure App Service. And later on this video, we are going to review some questions. So the first question is, what is Azure App Service? Azure App Service is fully managed platform as a service offering by Microsoft Azure. It is used to host web applications. So before we understand how is it useful for application and how does it work, we need to understand how app hosting works in IaaS model. So let's have a look at this structure. To host and run application on a virtual machine, first we need to create a virtual machine by choosing the operating system. It could be Windows or Linux. Then we need to install and configure middleware platform like IIS or Apache. So middleware platforms are basically going to host the application. Later on, we also need to install some runtime dependencies. It could be some dependencies related to the application, or it could be dependencies related to the data. After that, we need to upload our data, and finally, we can install our application. So in this structure, we can see starting from choosing the operating system, installing the operating system, and installing middleware, installing runtime, data, and app. All is something which is managed by us. In this approach, the manage and administration of operating system is on us. Upgradation of operating system or middleware platform needs to be done by us only. We also need to deploy and create multiple VMs in order to provide high availability also. And after their management is also our task to do. We also need to add a load balancing mechanism for traffic distribution, because if we are hosting our application, then multiple requests are going to come for our application, and we need to host our application in a way that it should be available to everyone. So we also need to have a mechanism of high availability and load balancing. So all these approaches, all these points are basically adding an extra layer of administration. However, Azure has a new offering which is called PaaS offering, which we are calling it as Azure App Service. So let's look on this, how the same structure works with Azure App Service. Now look at the same structure, and here we can see that in this option, Azure is managing the VM. So since the creation of virtual machine, operating system, installing of middleware, and runtime dependencies, all this is managed by the Azure itself. Our focus is only to upload our app data and run the app. This saves the extra administration of managing an OS and middleware. It also provides the high availability, load balancing, and auto scaling options. So in this option, we can see the Microsoft or Azure is basically managing the underlying infrastructure. However, our job is only to upload the data and install the app and start using it. So let's understand and review few key points related to Azure App Services. In this review, we are going to talk about Azure Apps key points to remember about Azure App Services. So as we talked about, Azure App Service is a fully managed platform as a service offering, which means we do not have to worry about the infrastructure. Then Azure App Service enables you to build and host web apps, mobile backend apps, and RESTful APIs in the programming language of your choice without managing the infrastructure. This clearly means we simply need to focus on the development and the code of our application, not the infrastructure which is managing. Then we can develop in our favorite language. It could be .NET, it could be .NET Core, Java, Node.js, PHP, and Python. So Azure App Service provides a various range of programming language in which we can write our code and directly upload to the Azure App Service to run it. It also offers auto scaling and high availability. So if you noticed in the previous approach, we have to install multiple VMs. We have to install load balancing mechanism to facilitate the auto scaling and high availability. However, in this Azure App Service, we do not have to worry about those parts as well, because Microsoft is going to take care of from our behalf. Also, this Azure App Service currently supports both operating system, Windows and Linux. Then, since it is a platform as a service offering, so Microsoft is offering us a 99.95% backed up uptime, which means 99.95% times Microsoft is agreeing and Microsoft is promising that our services infrastructure or whatever the underlying infrastructure which is running our Azure App Service will be up. With App Service, you pay for the Azure compute resources you use, which means whatever the computer resources we are going to use, we are only going to pay for that. And the computer resources you use are determined by the app service plan that run your apps. Now, this brings us our next item on the agenda, which is service app plan or app service plan. So let's have a look at it. What is app service plan? Let's understand this. In app service, an app, it could be web app, API apps, mobile apps, or any other apps, always runs in an app service plan. An app service plan defines a set of compute resources for a web app to run. One or more apps can be configured to run on the same computing resources or in the same app service plan. So app service plan is basically called a computing resources for app service. Here you can see we have app service plan, and which basically deals with the compute resources like CPU, RAM, and storage. We can one app service plan and we can install multiple apps on that. Also, we can have our multiple virtual machines installed behind the backend of Microsoft data center to support our application. All we need to do is to upload our app and run the application. So here in this approach, app service plan is basically the hardware which is managed by the Microsoft. You can see here we have different virtual machines, and it entirely depends on the Microsoft and the app service plan we are going to choose. So app service plan is basically the selection of compute resources from a list of compute resources given by the Microsoft. So we'll see when we'll go to the Azure plan about that. So app service plan can also be scaled up and scaled down at any time, which means if at the backend currently if there are 3 virtual machines which is running, so if the application is not in use, then this can be reduced to 1 or 2 virtual machines as well. Or if the requirement becomes higher, then these virtual machines can be increased at their own conditions. So this is the facility, or this is the option we are getting with the Azure App Service. Now you can potentially save money by putting multiple apps into one app service plan. However, since the same apps or apps in the same app service plan are going to share the same compute resources, so you need to understand the capacity of the existing app service plan and the expected load for the new application. Now let's review some key points related to app service plan. An app service plan defines a set of computer resources for web app to run. Now, one or more apps can be configured to run on the same app service plan. App service plan can be scaled up and down at any time. App service plan has 2 scaling options: scale out and scale up. We are also going to see about it when we'll go to the Azure portal. Then scale out, increase the number of VM instances to run our application. So if we choose the scale out option, the app services or the Azure is going to increase the number of VM instances for our app. And if we choose the scale up, then we are going to get more CPU, memory, and disk space with the same instances. And the app service plan can also be deployed as a zone redundant service in the regions that supports it. So this brings us to the next slide, and here we are going to see each app service plan has a number of VM instances which are going to be deployed at the backend, details of virtual CPUs and RAM which is going to be allocated, storage in terms of disk space, and pricing tier. So here is the snapshot for the app service plan looks like. So we'll see it in Azure portal in our lab section as well. So that's all about Azure App Service and Azure App Services plans. Let's go to Azure portal and create app services, how to deploy applications, and then finally see how it works. Let's go to the Azure portal, and we are in our Azure portal. We already have one resource group with the name 591 Lab. So let's go and see if we have any resources inside it. No resources inside. Okay. Let's go back to home and search here for app services. This option will come, the app services. Okay, there are two things we need to understand here. When we are going to create the app service, which says web app, then at the time of creation of our app service, we can create our app service plan. However, if I duplicate this tab and show it to you one more option, we can create our app service plan separately, and then we can use that separate app service plan inside the app services. So if you type the app service plan, you can see here we are also getting an option to create app service plan separately as well. For this lab, let's go and create app service plan while creation of our web app services. Okay, so we went into the home, we then go to the app services, and here we are going to create our first web app service or Azure app service. So first we need to fill the information of subscription and the information of resource group. In our case, our resource group is 591 lab. Then it is asking to provide a name of our web app. So in that case, I can mention 591 lab app, or just keep it 591 lab app. So here you can see the moment I typed 591lab.com and this Azure websites.net. So when I am going to publish my application into this app service, then I'm going to access my app's application by the URL 591labapp.azurewebsites.net. So we need to understand that. Then we have options. Either if we have the code, then we can directly publish the code here. Then we also have the option of Docker container and static web apps. So in this lab, we are simply going with the code option. Now, this is the runtime stack. This is important. We need to understand. So runtime stack is basically depends on in which programming language you have developed your applications. So for example, if an application is developed in .NET or C# or ASP, then we need to choose these runtime stacks. If an application is developed in Java, then we have to go with this. Similarly, we have multiple options here. If an application is developed in Python, we can go with this option as well. So we have to choose like in which programming language our application have been developed. So for our example, we are going to use PHP because we are not going to develop any application, but we are going to simply host a website, which I'm going to show you how. But for right now, we simply going to choose with the PHP option. Okay, the moment I chose the PHP, you can see I'm getting the option of Linux. It is not giving me the option to choose the Windows operating system. So this is also we need to understand. If I choose the .NET, then I'm getting the Linux and Windows options. So it depends on the Azure and the runtime stack, like what kind of operating system option I'm going to get. So for example, if I choose the Java 17, I'm simply getting the both option, Windows and Linux. But the moment I'm going to choose PHP or Python, I'm only restricted to Linux. So this is how Microsoft is managing. So let's switch back to PHP again. And anyhow, we do not need to manage these machines. So it doesn't matter how Microsoft is managing these machines. Okay. The region is, again, we need to simply choose the region in which we would like to deploy our web app. So it's pretty much similar to the resource group. Then now here comes the pricing plan. That's the important part to understand. So we have talked about app service plan in the previous slide. So you can see here, the moment I'm choosing this PHP and I'm getting the Linux plan here. So let's understand. First thing, it's asking to provide the name for my app service plan. So I can hit on create new and I can make it like 591 lab app service plan. So that is the name of my app service plan. Then it is asking to pricing the plan, which means I need to choose what kind of plan I'm going to use. So if you remember the snapshot from the PPT, we are going to see something like that. You see, we have different options available. At the top, you can see there are 22 app service pricing plans. And we know pricing plan is basically a set of compute resources, which means If I chose this basic B1, then I'm going to get one virtual CPU, 1.75 GB of memory, and 10 GB of storage. So in combined, this is called my app service plan. Also, we have premium, we have isolated, we have free tier as well. So these are our, popular, or these are our all pricing plans available with Azure App Service. If I choose the features view, then I'm going to get some more data or more information on this window. For example, the custom domain, the zone redundant. So this, if I go with the basic B1, then I'm not getting the zone redundant option. For the zone redundant option, I need to choose the premium option, where I need to use this option custom domain, and I can use the option of VNet integration. So these are the different features which is available with these different plans. For our lab, we are simply going to use the basic B1 plan, because we are just only going to deploy application to test it. So if I'm choosing the basic B1 plan, I'm getting one CPU and 1.5 GB of memory and 10 GB of remote storage. That is enough. Okay, one more point I would like you to have attention, which is scale instance. So if I click on this basic, then you see I'm getting the 3 instances, which means when I'm going to create my app service, then at the backend, Azure is going to deploy 3 instances maximum for me. Okay, so we'll see about it auto scale option or scale option when the app service will get created. So let's choose basic B1 and hit on next, and you see here this zone redundancy option enabled and then disabled. So right now there is no zone redundancy supported for basic tier, so that is why it is on disabled. Fine, let's go to next. Okay, app service also provides you a way, if there is an application which you are preparing or which you are developing, and that application also hosts a database, or that application also has a database to store the data. In that option, you can go with this create a database, which means in the Azure App Service itself, if your application requires a database, you can create that as well. For our lab, we don't need a database, so I'm just skipping this option. However, it is good to know, like this Azure App Service giving that option. Next, go to deployment. I'm just keeping everything as it is. Basic authentication, just hit on enable. And GitHub account, we don't need to choose anything here. Just keep as it is. And hit on tags, and then review and create. So it is going to take some time, and just going to hit on create. So it is going to take some time. So let's get this deployed, and then we'll resume. Deployment is completed now. So let's go to resource. So this is the web page, or this is our web app. The name of our web app is 591 Lab app. The status is running. Let's understand few settings on this page. So you can see here runtime stack is PHP 8.2. So for any Azure App Service, if you would like to see what is the runtime stack, which means like what kind of application I can deploy, then this is the piece of information you need to look for. Okay, after that, you can see we have the option of scale up and scale out here. Scale out and scale up. So as mentioned earlier, in the scale up option, basically we can upgrade the app service plan, which means right now I'm using the basic B1, where I am getting one virtual CPU and 1.75 memory and 10 GB of storage. If I would like to scale it up, which means if I can go to the premium or I can go to the standard. So if I would like to scale it up, the same in a number of instances will going to get more CPU, more RAM and more storage. And if I talk about scale out, then this scale out option is basically going to deploy more virtual machine instances behind the Azure App Services. So you can see here instance count here. So if I can increase it here, and now you can see the instance count maximum I can go is 3. Why? Because when I was choosing my app service plan, I chose for basic B1. And in the basic B1, you can see the scale instances supported is maximum number of 3. So if my application load will increase and Azure is going to deploy the virtual machine instances at the backend, the maximum I am going to get only 3. So this is why it is important to choose the app service plan wisely. So we have seen scale up and scale out options. Now there is a next option which we need to see is the deployment center. So deployment center is a place from where we are going to upload our code or upload our data directly into the web app. So to do that, first thing we need a code for the application, what kind of code we are going to deploy. So at the beginning, we have said we are going to deploy a web app. So for that, we need to do few arrangements here. First thing, go to the Google and here search for sample websites. And it will give you a lot of options here. You can choose anyone or you can sample website CSS. Let's see. Yes. So this is the website from where you can basically download the entire code for deploying your website. So let's choose this one, Carvilla. So Carvilla is my website which I'm going to host, or which my web application which I'm going to host on my Azure App Services. So first thing, we need to download it. So let's download it. Okay, it's downloaded. After downloading this, all I need to do is simply extract. Okay, so I think it's already downloaded, so I'm just replacing it. So now my application is downloaded, and if I open the folder, you can see these are the codes and these are the all my application package inside this folder. So now the next step is to upload this package into my Azure App Service. Only then my Azure App Service is going to run this code and run the application. So how I am going to upload the data or my application or my code into the Azure App Service plan? Azure App Services. For that, we are getting the option of deployment center. What we need to do, we need to simply go to home, then search for the app services which we have created, then go to 591 lab app, which is our web app or Azure App Services, then go to deployment center. And here, let's go to FTPS credentials. You see, FTPS endpoint is this. We need to, upload the data. So to upload the data for the FTPS endpoint, we need a third-party software, which we call WinSCP or FileZilla. Anyone, you can use that. So in my case, I'm using a WinSCP. So WinSCP is just a third-party tool which you can download it from the internet. It's quite easy and a straightforward installation. So it's only going to be used to connect my Azure Web App Service with my local laptop. So in order to connect that, I just need to provide you can see here, I have already created. So that's why it's giving a lot of options. So I just need to check for the option how I can connect again. Let me show you. Okay, so you just need to hit on new tab, and this is asking for the host name and the username and the password. So from where I'm going to get the host name, username and password. So if I'll come here in the FTPS credentials, you can see I have the FTPS endpoint. That is my host name. So I'll copy this. I'll go here and I simply paste it. So the moment I pasted, you can see the protocol got changed automatically. And it also takes the port number, which is 990. Then it is asking for me to enter user ID and password. So copy my user ID from here. And then copy my password. And after that, I need to hit on login. So it's login, and let's see if setting up the session or not. So now I can see the session is established. So you need to understand here, I am inside the site and www root, which means this folder is created on my Azure App Service. So this site is presenting the Azure App Service, and this site is presenting my local machine. So in my local machine, if I go to where I have actually saved my file, so click on the C drive windows or my documents. No, inside that Windows. Yes, I remember that I have downloaded that my application code into the download folder. So I need to go there, open, you can see open directory. Then I just need to browse and download, and inside that I have my application file. So I have browsed my application file. Then I simply need to select and drag and drop here. It is going to take some time to transfer all these files from my local machine to Azure App Service. So let this transfer complete, and then we will resume. So here this transfer is about to finish. So let's just wait for a few more seconds. Okay, that's superb. So what I did here, I have copied all my application related files directly into my Azure App Services, and the folder where it is getting copied is /site/www.root. Okay, now my files are copied here, and it seems all I need to test if my website is running or not, because we are not doing any development here. So we are simply posting the website directly into the Azure web app and checking if it is working or not. So let's go to again into the home, and in order to check where if I whatever the applications we have hosted, it's working or not. So just open the Azure App Service here, and there are two ways to do that. The first way is to let it load. Here there is the option of browse. So if I'll click on browse, then it will open a new browser or new portal window, and it should show the website which we have hosted. Sometimes it takes time to get started, so let's wait for a minute, and then it will be showing us the fine. Also, meanwhile it is getting loaded, and let me tell you, there is a 591 lab-app.azurewebsites.net. If you'll copy this address, and if you'll go and put it into the browser, then it should also load our application. Since we have just completed the copy of our file from my local machine to the Azure App Service, so we just need to wait for 1 minute or two so that Azure App Service can process it, and then it will show the actual web page which we are expecting to see. So after waiting for a minute, you can see it's loaded, and this is our website. And if you look at the address here, 591 labapp.azurewebsites.net. Similarly, you can look at here also, and the same address we have mentioned here. Okay, so we need to understand application scope is basically the FTPS credentials, and by using this we have uploaded our data into the Azure App Services. Till now we have seen how to create Azure App Services, what is Azure App Service Plan, how to deploy application by using Azure App Service. We need to use the deployment center, and then we need to push the code from our local machine to the Azure App Service. However, if you do not would like to push the code from your local machine, then you also have options like GitHub, Bitbucket, Azure repos. So these are also the source where we can keep your code, and from there you can push the code to the Azure App Service. So Azure App Service is basically a platform as a service offering given by the Microsoft Azure, and it is helping us to deploy our code directly, and all the infrastructure administration and the management is going to be done by the Microsoft Azure. I hope this explains all about Azure App Service and Azure App Service plans. Let's go back to our PPT and review some questions related to that. We are in our question review section. Here is our first question. You need to deploy resource to host a stateless web app in Azure subscription. The solution must meet the following requirement. It should support .NET Framework. It should provide redundancy if an Azure region fails. It should have options to scale up and down the resources. So in this question, we are supposed to suggest a resource which we need to deploy in Azure Cloud with these three requirements. Let's look at the options. We have Azure VM with SQL Server, Azure Storage Account, Azure Application Gateway, and Azure App Services. So by looking all these options, it is quite clear that Azure App Services is meeting all three requirements to host a stateless web application in Azure Cloud. So our answer should be Azure App Services. Let's go and have a look. Yes, that's our answer. Let's move to next question. In this question, it says Azure App Service has options to scale up and scale out. What does scaling up an app do? Choose the correct option. We have seen in our lab also, Azure App Services has the options to scale up and scale out the resources. Now in this question, it is asking what scaling up an application service do. So we all know scale up is all about adding more compute resources and changing the type of app service plan. However, the scale out is an option where we expect the Azure to increase the number of instances to load the application. So let's look at the options here. Switches the VM type your app service runs on with more CPU and memory. So I think this is our clear winner, the option A. But however, let's look at other options as well. Answer option B says increase the instance count. Then we have deploys another instance of your app into a different region and add zone redundancy to your app service plan. No, all these three options are not the part of scaling up operations. Scaling up is about to increase more CPU and compute resources to the VM. So let's look at the answer. Here is our answer. Let's move to the next question then. You have a Java app running in Azure App Service. Good. How do you validate which version of runtime stack is running for Azure App Service? Okay, choose the correct option. So we already have a Java app running in our Azure App Service. And the question is asking how are we going to check or validate what runtime stack is running for our Azure App Service. We need to understand runtime stack is basically a kind of framework. It's a kind of supported environment which we need to select at the time of creation of Azure App Service. We have also seen this in our lab. So if depends on the which programming language your application is made. If your application is made in Java programming language, you need to choose the runtime stack as Java. If it is made in Python or .NET, then you need to choose the runtime stack which supports that programming language. So we need to understand this fact. However, in this question, it is asking how we can check that option. So we have seen in our lab, when we go to the overview section, in the very front page of the app service, then we can see there is a property section, and inside that property we have seen the information about runtime stack. So by looking at this option, answer C should be our option. We can simply go to the overview page of Azure App Service after its creation, and we can get into the property section and get the information about runtime stack. Fair enough. Let's move to next question. Your application is deployed on Azure App Service. The app service plan is B1. You're hosted a web app named Demo App on Azure App Service. What would be the URL to access your application? So read this question carefully. It says the application is already deployed on Azure App Service, and the app service plan which is related to that Azure App Service is B1. Fine. So it says you are hosting, or your web app name is Demo App. So on your Azure App Service. So how are you going to access this? In our lab, we have seen there are two ways to access once the application is hosted on Azure App Service. One is to use the option browse, and the another one is to type or copy the URL of the Azure App Services. And the URL of the Azure App Service, even at the time of creation, we have seen this, it always ends with azurewebsites.net. So among these four options, whatever options has azurewebsites.net should be our answer. Let's have a look at them. So option A says demoapp.azurewindows.blob.core.net. Nope, that's certainly not an options. Demoapp.azure.com, nothing. Then we have demoapp.azurewebsites.net. Yes, that should be our answer. Let's have a look. Yes, that's our answer. Now it's time to move to next question. In this question, it says your on-premise data center contains a server that runs Linux and hosts a Java app named App1. Okay, we have a data center and we have a server in the data center which is running on the Linux operating system, and it is hosting a Java application named App1. App1 has the following characteristics. App1 is an interactive app that users access by using HTTPS connection. So HTTPS connection means it is a web app. Okay. The number of connections to App1 changes significantly throughout the day. This means a lot of users keep connecting to the App1 changes on App1 throughout the day. Okay. Then App1 runs multiple concurrent instances. And App1 also runs on multiple concurrent instances, which means multiple VMs are running in the backend. So you need to plan, or you plan to migrate App1 to Azure. You need to recommend a compute solution for App1. And solution also meet the following requirements. So the requirement says the solution must run the multiple instances of App1, which is fine. The number of instances must be managed automatically depending on the load. This means when the load gets increased or the user traffic gets increased, the number of instances should automatically be increased, which means it is talking about the scale out option. And the administrative effort must be minimized, which means it does not want to do the OS upgradation or platform upgradation, something like that. So what are the options are you going to recommend? So we have Azure Virtual Machine Skill Sets, Azure App Service, Azure Kubernetes Services, and Azure Batch. By looking all these options, Azure App Service should be our answer because it has all the options given in a requirement for this question. Yes, this is our answer. Let's move to the next question. In this question, it says you have application codes and package in GitHub repository. Okay, so application codes and packages are in GitHub repository. Your organization does not want to move the codes and packages anywhere. Okay, which option should you choose to host application with the data kept at GitHub repository? So here the requirement is we have all the application related codes and packages kept in GitHub repository. An organization does not want to move these data anywhere. So which option we are going to choose to host this application in Azure App Service? So we have options Deployment Center FTPS, we have option Deployment Center Source, then containers, and copy data from GitHub to local laptop and use FTPS options to upload. So one thing we need to understand here, organization does not want to move the data from GitHub repository. So the option D is not going to work, and option A, if you look at the option A, Deployment Center and then FTPS, that is also not going to work, because in the FTPS setting, we have seen in our lab, we simply upload the data from our local machine or from somewhere else to the Azure app. Then we are left with the option B and C. So option C is talking about containers. So we are not using the containers here. So we are left with option B, which is Deployment Center and Source. If you also noticed in our lab exercise as well, we have talked about this. When we go to the Deployment Center, we have the source option from where we can drop down and we get a lot of options like GitHub, Bitbucket, Azure Repo, something like that. So to host the packages directly from the GitHub repository, answer should be Deployment Center Source. Yes, that's our answer. Let's move to the next question. Which statement is not true in context of Azure App Service? It can be used to host web and mobile app in the cloud. Okay, so the question says it should not be true. Okay, that's fair enough. It can be used to host web and mobile app in the cloud. So this is basically true. In context of Azure App Service, this line is true. It is a PaaS offering service. This line is also true. It offers high availability, auto scaling, and load balancing. This option is also true in context of Azure App Service. Azure App Service can be used to host web and mobile application. It is a PaaS offering and it also offers high availability, auto scaling, and load balancing. So we are left with the last option, which says to manage and monitor resources in Azure. Yes, Azure App Service cannot be used to manage and monitor resources in Azure. So that is not true statement in context of Azure App Service. Yes, that is our answer. So that's all about the review question. So thank you all for attending today's class at 591 Lab. We hope you found the material informative and helpful. Remember, practice is the critical to mastering any new skill. So review the course content and keep practicing with 591 Lab help and support. If you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to contact us. We appreciate your participation and look forward to see you in our future classes. Before signing off, we have one more humble request. Please like this video, subscribe the channel, and hit the notification bell. This is going to help us to create the more content like this for you. Have a great day. Thank you.